You know what's funny about getting old? You stop counting what you won. You stop replaying the moments the cameras caught. People ask me about the cage. They ask me about WrestleMania, about Hulk Hogan, about the 5 count. They want the Kong Bundy story, the monster, the splash, the 458 pounds. And honestly, that stuff feels far away now. What stays close are the faces, the ones who never had their name on a marquee but shaped every single thing I did inside those ropes. These are the 5 names that come to my mind faster than anybody else. The first person I want to talk about is Big John Studd. When I first got to the WWF and started working alongside John, I did not know what to make of him. He was tall, loud when he needed to be, and on paper, we were competing for the same real estate, 2 big men trying to carve out space in a locker room that already had Andre the Giant taking up most of the air. There was every reason for us to be enemies. Off screen too. Most guys in that position would have made it their business to be, but John Studd never played that game. And I noticed that immediately. What people do not understand about John is how hard it was to be him in those years. He spent the better part of a decade being positioned as the second giant, the shadow man, the one they moved around the card when Andre was not available for a match. Critics thought he was just a prop, a tall body they staged next to a real star to make the real star look more dangerous. John absorbed that framing without complaint. Never once did I hear him tear another man down in that locker room to make himself feel larger. That kind of restraint is rarer than it sounds in this business. What John gave me was something I could not have asked for directly. Dependability. Quiet, no drama, no conditions, dependability. When we worked together alongside Bobby Heenan against Andre and Hulk Hogan on Saturday night's main event in late 1985, John did not need me to call anything in the ring. No signal. No pre-planned communication. He simply knew where I was, and I knew where he was. 2 large men moving like one thing. I remember standing in that ring under those lights and thinking, this is what trust actually feels like in this business. Not spoken, just present. In a profession built entirely on illusions, John Studd was the most honest presence I ever shared a ring with. No performance off the camera, no agenda, just showing up and doing the work. When I think about John today, I think about solidarity, the kind that does not ask for anything in return. The next person I want to talk about is Jimmy Hart. Now I know how that sounds. Jimmy Hart, the little guy with the megaphone and the polka dot jacket. I understand the reaction. When you are 6'4" and pushing 500 pounds, being paired with a man who barely clears your elbow does not feel like a natural partnership. The first time Jimmy started yelling directions at me, I genuinely considered walking the other way. I am glad I did not. What people forget about Jimmy is that he operated in a world where nobody took him seriously. The crowd laughed at him every night. The boys in the back did not see him as a real force. He was noise, they said. He was a cartoon character in a business full of larger-than-life personalities, and maybe that is how I saw him early on too. But here's what Jimmy Hart understood that I did not. Nothing in this business happens by accident. Momentum is manufactured. Every match, every entrance, every word dropped into a promo, all of it is preparation stacked on top of preparation, layer after layer, until the audience feels something they cannot explain. Before WrestleMania 1, when I walked out and finished SD Jones in 9 seconds, Jimmy had been in my ear for days about that entrance. The pace of those steps down the aisle, the expression, the body language before the bell even rang. He was not choreographing a performance. He was a foreman laying a foundation, and he built it with the kind of daily discipline that most people in this business never develop. I was a raw piece of material in 1984. I had the size, I had the anger, but I had no architecture. Jimmy Hart gave me the framework before Bobby Heenan ever gave me the spotlight. That sequence matters more than people know. When I think about Jimmy today, I think about preparation, the quiet, unglamorous work that happens before anyone is watching. When I was handed off to Bobby in September of 1985, I had already heard the speeches. Every manager in this business talks like they can change your life. I had been around enough of them to recognize the difference between a salesman and someone who actually believes what he is selling. Bobby Heenan believed in what he was selling. That was different. That was disorienting at first, honestly. Bobby's job in those years was not easy. Think about what he was actually being asked to do. Take a man who weighed nearly 500 pounds a man, the audience already filed under carnival attraction, and convince an entire country that this man could walk into a steel cage and take the WWF Championship away from Hulk Hogan. That is not a small proposition. Hogan was everything in 1985. Television, action figures, the morning cartoon, the full cultural machine. And Bobby Heenan sat across from me in a room and said, "You can beat him. Not for the cameras. In private." He said it like stating a known fact. Bobby taught me how to hold up 5 fingers. I realize how that sounds, but he understood what it meant to have a single recognizable thing, a calling card the audience could attach to you before you said a word. The 5 count was not my invention. It was his architecture, built around my body and my character, and then sold to the people until it felt like it had always existed. I remember the weeks leading into WrestleMania 2 Inches Los Angeles. Bobby shaping every promo, adjusting every line, never satisfied until the threat felt genuinely real. He was not managing a monster. He was writing a story with a monster in it, and he understood the difference. When I think about Bobby today, I think about vision, the rare ability to see what a man can become before the man sees it himself. The next person I want to talk about is Andre the Giant. I know that is complicated. On television, Andre and I were enemies. I attacked him. I gave him a kayfabe broken sternum. We feuded through the second half of 1,985 tag matches, singles matches, the whole machine running on full heat. The crowd despised me for what I did to him. That was the job, and we both understood it. But here is what the camera never captured. Andre the Giant was in real physical pain for most of those years. His body was deteriorating in ways that would have stopped any other man from walking into an arena, let alone performing inside one with other large men falling against him. Every night he went out there was an act of sustained will that I do not think people have ever properly accounted for. He carried that weight, the physical weight and everything else that came with being Andre, without explanation and without complaint. He showed up every time. What Andre gave me was perspective. When you are a large man, you get used to the world treating you as a spectacle. People measure themselves against you before you open your mouth. People have already decided what you are. Andre lived that more intensely than any person I ever met, and yet he moved through rooms with a quiet authority that I found myself watching and studying. He did not perform his size. He simply occupied space, and the space reorganized itself around him. I remember the night of the colossal jostle at Madison Square Garden in September 1985. Before we went out, in the corridor backstage, Andre turned and looked at me. Just looked. Then he nodded once, slowly, and walked toward the curtain. No words. I knew exactly what it meant. We are here. Let us go do the work. When I think about Andre today, I think about gravity, the kind that pulls everything toward it without ever announcing itself. And the last person I truly loved the most was Hulk Hogan. I know that will confuse people. Hogan was the enemy. Hogan was the reason I never wore that championship. He was the face on every poster and every t-shirt, while I was the obstacle they assembled in his path and then removed once the story reached its conclusion. That is the straightforward version of what happened between us, and I am not going to pretend otherwise. But here is the other version, the one that is also true. WrestleMania 2, the 7th of April, 1986, Los Angeles. Steel cage. The largest match of my career by any honest measurement. I walked into that arena, and the noise was a physical thing. It pressed against you from every direction, and somewhere inside that building, the audience had already decided how the night ended. They were not wrong about the outcome, but they did not understand what it cost to be the man who made that ending feel earned rather than inevitable. Hulk Hogan needed a real threat that night, not a prop. Not a cartoon villain the crowd dismissed the moment he appeared. He needed someone the audience could genuinely believe might climb over that cage and leave with the championship, even for a few minutes, even in the back of their minds. I was that man on that night. And I worked every single minute of that match to make his survival feel like survival, not a foregone conclusion, not charity, survival. What nobody tells you about is what Hogan said afterward. He went to people in the company and acknowledged the work. In a business where the winner absorbs the entire story, he shared the credit. That cost him nothing. He did it anyway. That tells you something about the man beyond the character. I never got the championship. I never got the Hall of Fame induction. Those things sting. I will not pretend they do not. But that night in Los Angeles, inside that cage, I was not a spectacle. I was not a prop. I was a real opponent in a real match, and the crowd felt the difference. I gave Hulk Hogan the most credible challenge of his championship reign, and he gave me the only night I ever walked out of an arena feeling like I truly belonged at the top of this business. You do not forget a night like that. Even when nobody ever puts your name on the wall, the older I get, the more I understand what actually disappears. The headlines disappear. The heat from the crowd, that burning electric heat when you walk into an arena and 12,000 people want to see you destroyed, that disappears too. The debates about the 5 count, the arguments about my weight, the photograph of me standing over SD Jones at the very first WrestleMania, all of it becomes noise eventually, and noise fades. So, what does not fade is a corridor in Madison Square Garden, a man turning and nodding once before walking through a curtain. What does not fade is Jimmy Hart's voice running through an entrance on a Tuesday afternoon in February when nobody was watching and nothing was being recorded. What does not fade is John Studd covering a lane without being asked, Bobby Heenan pointing across a room and saying simply, "You can do this." That is the record that lasts, not the scoreboard, the people. So let me say it plainly, for anyone who is still listening. Big John Studd brought solidarity, the kind you cannot manufacture and cannot fake. Jimmy Hart brought preparation, the invisible daily work that made the visible work possible. Bobby Heenan brought vision. He saw a WrestleMania main event before. Andre the Giant brought gravity, a standard, presence and endurance that permanently changed how I understood what this job required of a person. And Hulk brought sacrifice, not his sacrifice. Mine, the gift of a real story, told honestly, inside a steel cage, in front of the whole world. People point to the size when they try to explain King Kong Bundy. They point to the splash, they point at the 5 fingers. But none of that becomes anything without 5 human beings who invested something real in a man who spent most of his career pretending he did not need anyone at all. I used to walk to that ring alone, head down, eyes forward. The monster needs no one. That was the gimmick. Nobody asked me who shaped King Kong Bundy, but now you know. And the answer was never a monster. It was 5 human beings who believed in something I did not yet believe in myself. If you had to walk back into the hardest moment of your career, who are the 5 people you would want standing beside you?